Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the March TZD Traffic Safety Hotdish. Today, we're going to be talking about the power of partnership and how collaboration is driving results in roadway safety, maybe more accurately, local partnerships and regional partnerships, and this focus on building partnerships from the ground up and the top down as we move through our traffic safety work. Before we get to the presentations, some thank yous and some information on the background. We can move to the next slide. First of all, definitely need to thank the Center for Transportation Studies and Jackson and Stephanie and the whole team over there for putting together the webinars and the whole TZD partnership between the Minnesota Department of Health, Minnesota Department of Public Safety, Minnesota Department of Transportation, and NHTSA, and a whole range of other folks and players that are all part of the TZD family for being part of these webinars and being part of this ongoing effort to push traffic safety across the state. So, for your information, this webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on the TZD website. All the attendees are muted. We'll talk in a moment about how to get feedback into the system. If you need professional development hours, you can find the form that you need to apply for that on the TZD Traffic Safety Hotdish webpage. You can see the QR code and the URL for today's event on this screen. So if you need that, snap that and you can get to the website. If you want to talk amongst yourselves and let the panelists and the people who are helping run this behind the scenes know that you need technical assistance, on the bottom of your screen is a chat button. Please use that. If you want to ask the speakers a question, please use the Q&A. We should have time at the end of this session for some questions and answers, at least a few. So please feel free to fill that with questions and answers. And if we can't get to all of them, we'll try to figure out a way to get answers out to the broader group of folks as we move forward. So we're lucky today to have three speakers with us, and I'm going to actually kind of talk about them in reverse order. So Annette Larson, who's the statewide program and operations director, is going to talk to us about safe road coalitions. And safe road coalitions, in many ways, are taking TZD to the ground. It's this mini version of a statewide TZD partnership, or maybe more accurately, the statewide TZD partnership rides on top of all these local coalitions that get together and work on traffic safety issues. So she's going to talk about the Safe Road Coalitions, how they play on the ground, what role they play in this big picture. And that's got a deep history in working on that regional level. And in some ways, the regional and that local level is where the most focused interest is on those local issues. So Annette will talk about that in the back part of this conversation. On the front end, we've got Shannon Graybo, who's the grant and program supervisor at the Office of Traffic Safety. She's been in that role for a few months now, has a longer history with the department, also worked for AAA in the past. So a long history in the traffic safety and safety arena. And for those of you who don't know Derek Luer is the state traffic safety engineer. Most of the time, if we have a question about something related to engineering and traffic safety, Derek's one of the first people we all call. So Derek gets to fill that role, and we're pleased he's here today. And the two of them are going to tag team a presentation about safe road zones and rural high-risk roadways. And I'm just going to take a moment to talk about how those programs came to be, and then we'll turn it over to Derek and Shannon. So rural high-risk roadways. Let's talk about that for a minute, for starters. So how did this program and focus come to be? Forever, when you look at the data in Minnesota, about 65% of crashes occur in the 7-11-ish metro county area. So in the metro area is where 2/3 of crashes occur, give or take, in a given year. But 3 out of 4 fatalities in this state occur outside of the metro area. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. I mean, you do have traffic congestion in the metro, so you have fender benders on freeways during rush hour. That's very different than what we see in the rural areas of the state, where you have higher speeds, less controlled roadways, less controlled intersections, maybe poorer shoulders on the roadways, more road runoffs, And the combination of those factors lead to this imbalance with fatalities, 3 out of 4 occurring in the rural areas. So in 2023 and before, but in the 2023 legislative session, there was some funding that was aimed by the legislature directly at this rural high risk roadway issue. And Derek and Shannon will talk about how that played out. But that's how that program came to be. The other is the Safe Road Zones program, which is very close cousin to the Safe Road Coalition's work. And this is the notion, this is a program that allows a local jurisdiction, after they've identified an issue and had the appropriate buy-in from the leadership of that jurisdiction, to essentially petition the state to start helping them work on a traffic safety issue. And there's been some tremendous success over the years with projects like this. There's always been an avenue for this to occur, but the Safe Road Zone programs that was funded and kind of reestablished in 2023 elevated the attention to this process again. But the Highway 12 corridor west of Wayzata, between Wayzata and Delano, and actually west of there, is a great example of a safe road zone type of project. A local coalition got together and was looking at incidents on Highway 12 and on the 394 and Highway 12 bypasses in that region. And they were seeing about a fatality a month. And they came together and said, we need to do something about this. And over time, they generated interest, they generated support from the private sector, from all the electeds, all the way up through the legislative process and the state agencies to do something in that corridor. And mitigation measures were installed. And I believe there's only been 2 fatalities since those mitigation installations, and that's over about a 3 or 4 year period. So tremendous success story of this organic, we got a problem, let's all figure out what to do about it project. And another one that other folks maybe don't know about has to do with Malco Manufacturing out near Annandale, Minnesota. And Malco's facility sits on a state highway, and there's a county road right next to it. And there's also an intersection with a railroad just a little bit south of that main intersection. At shift change, Malco has about 200 vehicles that move through that intersection. They were seeing crashes. They were seeing incidents with the rail. They were seeing other issues in that space. They started to talk to their city. They started to talk to the county. They started talking to the state, and enough attention and energy was generated that changes were made on that intersection. That's made it much, much safer. I don't have the data on how many crashes they've got, but I know the last time I talked to Malco, they were no longer concerned about that flow of traffic during their shift changes. So both of these show how that local focus can drive safe road results for everyone. These became real programs, had some real money behind them, and that's what Derek and Shannon are going to talk to us about today. So with that, I will turn it over to Derek and Shannon. And thank you guys both for being here. We always appreciate all the work you guys do.
All right. Thanks for that intro, Paul. That was a lot to fill in now. Now we gotta deliver. All right. Can everybody see my screen and hear me and see me and all the above? You all good?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Just wanted to confirm. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And thank you, Paul, for that intro. As Paul mentioned, my name is Derek Luer. I work here at the Minnesota Department of Transportation. I work as the state traffic safety engineer. So Paul did a lot of really great work to get these programs into the legislature and funded. Once they got funded and signed off, it was up to me and Shannon to figure out how to get them executed. So that's what we'll be talking about today is a little bit about these programs came to be, and that's always step one. Then the next part is how to get this money out to where we want it to go and what was the intent of the legislation. So the first one I'll talk about today is the rural high risk roads. And that was one program that's put into the 2023 Transportation Omnibus Bill. In the 2024 bill there, we got $10 million for this new program that was never been before. That was called the Rural High Risk Roads. And then the other part of the program was that was also called Rural High Risk Roads, even though they weren't really linked together exactly. But there's another $2 million given to DPS. Shannon, do you want to talk about that one a little bit?
Yep. So that $2 million was a little bit of a rough timeline, only because as we kind of highlight right at the beginning, that was part of the 2023 Transportation Omnibus Bill. And because the funding had to be used in federal fiscal year 2024, I'm sorry, federal fiscal year, and I'll explain why it had to be used during that time. It had to be used in fiscal year 24. However, to be able to use this money, as Derek kind of talked about, some challenges in getting this money out the door is we only received this money in 2023. Well, our enforcement grant program that we currently had seemed to fit the mold for how we're going to do this and incorporate it and get it executed. Well, that year begins October 1st of 2023. So we had a super short timeline. So we didn't necessarily have a period of time that we can open up an RFP and ask for everybody to submit their applications because we just received the money. We got to get that money right out that door, and those grants had to be executed in October 1st of 2023. So what we did is incorporated that funding into our existing law enforcement grant groups. And when I say grant groups, all of those are already kind of grant groups. They're working together. They were supposed to focus on targeted speed reduction on rural high-risk roadways. That worked out really well because we had a really good research team that was able to identify what those rural high-risk roadways were. So our research team did that. They put it on our website, and I asked our grantees, can you use this funding and how much can you use? So they did a little bit of a supplemental application, even though they already applied for their regular enforcement grant. So because of the timing, we didn't have the luxury of opening it up to everybody. Next slide. So as I mentioned, because it was already part of the enforcement grant, our enforcement grant was typically focusing on speed in the month of July. So historically, we're always like, okay, July, this is our speed month. Agencies knew that. But with this new additional money of roughly $2 million, we had a lot more to spend. So what are we going to do with it? We're going to expand that month of July and coincide with the 100 deadliest days. So Memorial Day through Labor Day. And so what that did is gave agencies a lot more flexibility where sometimes we had challenges of agencies not being able to work, maybe vacations in July or short staffed. I mean, we're still dealing with some short staffing in some of the agencies that we were working with. So opening that up to 100 deadliest days, which really makes a lot of sense because that's where our speed fatalities were occurring is during that time. So it gave us a pile of money for agencies to use on targeted speed reduction and enforcement during the entire time. So what did that look like on the end? So we looked at what ROAR, real-time officer activity reporting, that's our system that officers log into to track their traffic stops. So they were logging into ROAR, and we looked at federal fiscal year 2023 citations for speed. That was just over 34,000. So with a bunch of extra money and more flexibility, did it increase? Well, it did. It definitely increased. But what that did not include was the already active, on duty citations. So that number right there, that 47,000, it does not include the additional time for state patrol. So it's a little bit of a skewed number. That number would likely be higher if we were able to include that, but we can't include on-duty state patrol time. The partnership. So we're talking about partnerships today. Well, the rural risk high roadway kind of designation really fit into this because all of our enforcement grants are already multi-agency, multi-jurisdictional, focusing on high visibility. That's a partnership that was already in place. It was really well. And they frequently collaborate with the State Patrol on their high visibility enforcement events. So it was, again, a really nice fit in a super short timeline.
All right. Thank you, Shannon. All right, so that was the DPS side of the program. So the program within that got put into the transportation part of the legislation was funded through MnDOT. As the program came together and reading through the legislation, there were constraints that we had to follow. This wasn't money that was just given to the DOT to do whatever we wanted. But really, one of the big things that we first noticed was that the money did need to be spent on the trunk highway network. So these were projects that needed to be on what most people would classify as the big roads. So things like the interstate, US routes, Minnesota routes. So things that are the designated trunk highway network, the roads that MnDOT is technically responsible for. The other thing that came with the legislation was that the projects needed to be either spent or let, and let is the term used within our industry to just mean that the contract has been let out and a contractor has been awarded. So we just need to have that money designated to be spent by June 30th of 2026. Now, if you remember, this legislation was signed on June 20 or June 30th, 2023, or I'm sorry, came into effect July 1st, 2023. Now that is, it sounds like a lot of time, sounds like 3 years. Yeah, that's why can't we get projects built in 3 years? A lot of projects we can deliver in 3 years. That's usually just fine. But if it's a bigger project, if it's a project that's going to be turning earth, going to be adding pavement, that is a pretty fast timeline for MnDOT just because of all the environmental and design work that we need to do on any given project. Typically larger projects we need to acquire right of way. Right of way takes time to acquire. So 3 years sounds like a lot, but in an infrastructure project-based world, 3 years can be a remarkably tight timeline. So we did have some concerns if we were going to be able to deliver this money, especially if we wanted to build some bigger projects. The other thing that they put in the legislation was that, as you saw in the title there, rural high-risk roads. They did say that the money needed to be spent on rural roadways. The nice thing was the legislation didn't specifically define for us what rural meant. They kind of left that for us to decide. So we decided that we try to use rural as the loosest term we could come up with and be defendable, which was we ended up using the state aid definition, which is basically any area that's outside of a municipal boundary of 5,000 people or more. So any city that's got 5,000 or more people within its jurisdiction is out, but everything outside of that is in for our program. And if you probably look at the land area in Minnesota that meets that definition, that's probably 95 to 97% of our state meets that definition. So it really left a pretty big open area for us to apply the projects. As part of the legislation, or not as part of the legislation, but as part of the solicitation that we sent out, and I'll get into this, we did have some project recommendations to try to meet with the intent of the legislation. So we recommended things like roundabouts, J-turns, dynamic feedback signs, pedestrian median refuge islands, bike lanes. It wasn't an exclusive list, but it was just an idea for people to get the creative juices flowing, so to speak. Due to the tight timeline, we were able to get the applications out as quickly as possible. We had them out on the street by February 2024. We opened up the solicitation with it being due back in March of 2024, gave people a month to respond. One of the tricky parts too was part of the legislation was that the legislation required that these projects be selected in collaboration with the Advisory Council on Traffic Safety. What kind of made that tricky too was when this legislation was signed, the Advisory Council on Traffic Safety didn't even exist yet. It had to be stood up and formed. So not only did we need to select the projects very quickly, we had to run it by this Advisory Council on Traffic Safety that wasn't even existent yet. So we had to kind of wait for the Advisory Council to get up and running, get a group selected, and then use that group to help select these projects. Part of the solicitation, we just asked people pretty basically, we try to keep this as simple as possible due to the quick turnaround time, but we wanted just basically a project description, how the project was identified, and what other agencies are you partnering with. We really tried to promote the partnerships. We really wanted to make sure this wasn't just MnDOT selecting projects for MnDOT's needs. It was also MnDOT working with local agencies to get some of these projects selected. I would say overall, on the grand scheme of things, I'd say we had a moderate interest level. We did have applications come in. We had 15 projects submitted, which was probably anywhere from 10 to 15 more than I was expecting at times. Sometimes these solicitations, you just don't know what you're going to get. But we got 15 projects submitted. We had $14 million in requested funds, which is great, which if you remember, we only had 10 million. We got 14 millions in requests. Hey, we can spend every one of these dollars now. We can at least get all the money out the door. For the most part, we saw roundabouts, dynamic speed signs, transverse rumbles. We did see some money to requesting a diverging diamond interchange and then a 1J turn study. Those are kind of the basic projects we saw. I'll get into those a little bit. But some of those projects we read through, we determined they did not really meet the intent of the program, so we removed those. And some of them actually they met better funding sources that we had available, and we'll get into that a little bit too. So we actually switched the funding source on some of these too to make sure we could keep them funded. Overall, one of the biggest projects that we ended up selecting were these dynamic feedback signs. If you guys have ever seen these out on the roads, they're usually pretty effective if you're in a transitional area, which when I say I mean that, I mean you're on a road going about 60 miles per hour, you're coming into a smaller city, and we know we want to get you down to 25 or 30 miles per hour. These signs work really well because they'll actually show you your speed, and dynamically react to it. And sometimes they're not supposed to anymore, but they'll flash at you and let you know your speed, and that actually works really well to get people down to the speed that we want them to be entering the sign in. The amazing thing is, all 7 of our districts in Greater Minnesota. So MnDOT, we have 8 districts. One of them is the Metro. The other 7 are in Greater Minnesota. All 7 districts in Minnesota had these projects applied for. So we hit every corner of the state with these signs. Overall, we ordered over 200 signs across the state. And right now and working to install these. We're using MnDOT forces to install them to just keep the cost down a little bit more and we can get more of them installed. But technically, once they are in the ground and they're operating, they are actually owned by those local units of government. So if you see one I'll just throw out an example, if you see one in War Road, Minnesota, that sign is actually owned and operated and maintained by War Road. Typically, the way we operate these signs is the locals do need to purchase, own, and operate these. The nice thing about this program was it allowed us to purchase the signs, but it ultimately leaves the sign ownership to the local agencies. So with those hundreds of signs that we've ordered, we also had to get hundreds of agreements in place. We need every city to agree to own and operate these. So that was a pretty big lift to get all these cities owned and operated. So. Overall, we got 6 roundabouts funded, which is huge to get 6 roundabouts funded. That's a pretty successful solicitation. You can see the list of where we got those built, kind of all over the state, southwest near the metro here, and then one up in Wadena, Minnesota too. And 5 of these projects, 5 out of these 6 are direct partnerships with counties. We had to work directly with the county because the minor leg roads, those roads that aren't owned by us, were owned by the county. So we had to work very closely with the county to get that project up and running. One of them was even county led. That one on Trunk Highway 12 and CSAH 14 in Wright is actually led by Wright County, even though it is on the Trunk Highway network. They saw it as a priority enough to where they wanted to get it funded. We got some rapid rectangular flashing beacons out there as well. RRFB, if you've ever heard that term, this is a sign that just flashes when it's activated by a pedestrian, lets drivers know that a pedestrian wants to use the road. We got 2 of these. One was in Belgrade, Minnesota. The other was in Bruton, Minnesota. If you know where that is, it's central Minnesota, pretty close to St. Cloud. Direct city partnerships. These are projects that the cities directly solicited for and wanted to get built. All right. So that was the Rural High Risk Roads program. That one, we saw some good partnerships between, for example, between the DOT and local highway agencies. DPS, I think you guys saw a really good partnership with the local law enforcement agencies. This next program we're going to talk about, though, but the other thing on the high risk rural roads, as Shannon and I kind of mentioned, was they ended up kind of operating kind of separately. MnDOT, we kind of stuck to our side. DPS, they kind of stuck to their side, and that's just kind of the way the program was written into legislation. This program we're going to talk about next, the Safe Road Zones, very different. We ended up, this was one where we had to work very closely together and we had some really good direct collaboration. So listen for that in this upcoming part. Once again, just some background on this. Paul kind of led a little bit of this as well, just saying that this was already in the omnibus bill. They did some really good work up front. So this program, as it came out of the omnibus bill in 2023 there for fiscal year 2024, was we've got $1 million in what was now, once again, a new program called Safe Road Zones. We got $1 million for infrastructure / education / public awareness. And then we also got another $1 million for DPS to do law enforcement grants as well. So the whole purpose of the program was really to do development and delivery and to have public awareness and education campaigns about these safe road zones. So the whole point of the program was that a city or a county or an agency could designate a road as a safe road, and then they could do these things for public awareness and do some improvements on that road and get some enforcement out there all at the same time to really promote this idea that, hey, we want people to be more careful in this road. Really across the board, it was open to anybody. MnDOT districts could apply, tribal areas could apply, counties, state aid cities. And even though smaller cities could apply, but they just needed what was called a fiscal steward, basically the county saying we will help maintain, or we will help be a fiduciary for the city for these funds. So just a Minnesota state statute thing. Don't get too concerned about that, but just something we did need to be aware of. So the legislative criteria was I'll say specific, but also vague at the same time. It did say that these funds needed to be spent in areas where there were traffic safety concerns, and they kind of laid out what those traffic safety concerns should be. It could be excessive speeding, crash history, concerns for the safety of people walking and biking in the area, specific intersection risks, or to address roadway designs. Now that you could look at that either way. That's pretty specific. You need to meet one of those criteria. But if you look at that on the other side, pretty much anything could probably fall under some of those criteria. Excessive speed could be fairly subjective. I could see something as subject as it being excessive speed out there, but also it could also be seen as just, people are driving a little bit over the speed limit. Is that excessive? I don't know. I didn't have to make that determination, but they did have criteria that we did try to follow that the money would flow to projects that meet these definitions. So the combined app. So what we did was we tried to make it so that these would be in spirit of the legislation that we would have kind of a combined application that a city and a county, a city or a county or any local agency would apply for the funds at the same time. They would ask for both infrastructure improvements and for the law enforcement at the same time. That they would ask for the money from both of them. The applications were distributed in April of 2024, and we had them out there again for about a month. So they were due early May. The other part that was challenging with this too was funds had to be spent by June 30th of 2025. Once again, this money became available July 1, 2023. So it gave us about 2 years to spend the money, but it did give us the kicker too that we did have to spend this money with consultation with the Advisory Council on Traffic Safety, which once again did not exist yet at that moment. So we had to work with the advisory council. We had to get the solicitation out there, and even getting all that as fast as we could. We were still out there by May of 2025, or sorry, May of 2024, which gave us about a year to spend the money. Which in some regards, a year is a long time. In other regards, like spending money, sometimes a year can be very short. But in the application, we asked agencies to identify the project. Tell us a little bit about your project, what you want to do, why it's important. How did you identify this project was important? And then, we also even set it up so that if you worked with other agencies, so if you were at city public works along with the city local law enforcement, if you guys partnered up, we try to give you additional points for that. So we really try to encourage these partnerships to get people to start talking more often. Again, I would say there was moderate interest level. We got some good questions. We tried to have a little webinar trying to tell people, hey, this is the program. This is what we're trying to do. These are the goals of the program. Again, sometimes you send out these solicitations, you really have no idea what you're going to get back. But we did get 23 applications were submitted, and we read through all those. We tried to make sure they met the definition of the program, that they would be able to deliver those projects. And we approved all 23 projects. So this was one of those rare instances where we actually had enough funding to cover every project that came in. If you remember earlier, I talked about the rural high-risk roads that we switched some of those funding types. Because we had excessive needs in the rural high-risk roads and we didn't quite hit all the funding needs for the safe road zones, we actually moved some of those rural high-risk road projects over to the safe road zone so we could continue to get them funded. They did meet the intent, and we just wanted to make sure that we wanted to encourage people that if we get the solicitation again, if we get money like this again, let's try to encourage people to submit because it does take time to submit an application, and we want people to be encouraged and we want people to be rewarded if they do submit. So with that, so those are our awarded projects. And then I'll let Shannon talk a little bit about the DPS side of things.
Like Derek mentioned, the challenging part was one application, two completely different processes. So the really good thing is that Derek and I worked pretty well together, and we were pretty much in constant communication because an agency, again, they applied for one grant with two completely different programs. They might be reaching out to Derek about an enforcement related thing, not understanding that one had to go through completely different state agencies. So we figured it out. Constant communication. Our partnership with Derek and I was pretty spot on there. But what we did is we had a budget of 950,000. So yes, $1 million, but when we're putting it into the enforcement piece of it, because legislation required us to take $50,000 and do some administrative type of costs, 950,000 was the budget we were going to be able to give out to the agencies. The different part about the this program versus the other one is this one we had a little bit more time to be able to actually open it up for an application process, and it was obviously combined with MnDOT. So this was tell us what you want to do. It wasn't just automatically incorporated into the already existing enforcement grants. This was a little bit looser. When I say looser, is tell us what you want to do. It didn't necessarily have to follow the same kind of rules that our enforcement grant did with the collaboration of other agencies. Yes, that was great, but it didn't necessarily have to. This program was more meant legislatively intent to make sure that we're combining the enforcement with the infrastructure education and doing a bigger, kind of broader look and other than just enforcement. And that was kind of the intent. So what we ended up having is it encompassed 23 agencies with 13 grants. This was our timeline, June of by the time we got those grants out the door to obviously when it expired, June 30th of 2025. So the good news is that if they applied for a grant, they received it. So that's not always the case. And so that was really nice. And in a lot of cases, more funding was awarded than what was requested. Super, super rare is I actually had the ability to go to an agency and say, I know you requested $100,000. Would you like 200? Because we had the funding. And they were very surprised and said, absolutely, we will. And they used it, which was wonderful. That doesn't happen very often. Next slide. Next. So I know that's kind of a lot of information on one slide, but you can see our budget was $950,000. This is what was awarded. And I'm kind of call out in this next couple of slides a couple of different groups because there was some multi-jurisdiction grant groups that came as a application together. Again, most of these were going to be just single agency enforcement groups, single agency grants, but a couple of these are going to be multi-agencies. The South Lake Minnetonka group, many of you guys have probably already seen that Highway 7 group. We'll talk a little bit more of that, but that's kind of what the budget was. They did a really good job of spending down that money. That was really what we wanted to do. We got some match involved out of that. That was really helpful as well. So we did spend 838,000 of that 950. That's actually pretty good when you're aiming toward that 90%, 100% level. So we did a pretty good job of that short turnaround time, especially when grants were not even asking for as much money as we gave them. Next. So I kind of put a star here because this group, the Elk River group, which consisted of Big Lake, Elk River, and Sherburne County, the reason why I kind of stuck a little star by them is they really did a great job on the enforcement side of things. In the application that they said they want to focus on speed. Great, that's wonderful. Well, they did a lot of speed citations. And they gave some warnings, and it's always kind of fun to see when the citations are higher than the warnings because obviously we're looking to change behavior. And those citations, as we know, is a countermeasure that does work is when we have more of the citations than the warnings. And certainly there's time for those warnings, but this was a really good example of that. And I kind of just on the bottom, yes, they focused on speed, but they also obviously didn't let some of those other violations go too. So got some arrests out of there, some increased citations, and they were the group that really kind of surprised me. So for just under $100,000, they gave us a lot of citations. So this was the group that really kind of surprised me and hit it over the top. Next. This is a single agency grant, but again, their budget was just a hair higher and they did a lot of things. They also said that they wanted to focus on speed, but they also focused on a lot of other things as well. Those citations for other violations, they focused on a lot of things, the DARs, driving after revocation, or cancellation, suspension, whatever it is. So they really did kind of a broad picture of those but they did obviously target for speed, and that was wonderful. So for just over $100,000, we got a lot of good results out of them. Next. In this group, I wanted to talk a little bit more about because this was definitely the full picture. They told us they wanted to focus on distraction. They definitely did not just focus on distraction, but that was what in their application they wanted to focus on. They did a great job of focusing on speed. They did a great job of focusing on other things, but that was what they, in their application, they said that they wanted to do. So there, again, this is the group, and I want to give a shout out to them because they really had a full big picture, and that success shows in the crash data is the success of the reduction. And so when you look at just under $200,000, keep in mind this group asked for 100,000. So they did a great job of spending twice the amount that they asked for, and they gave us a lot for it. Next. So again, the power of the partnership, this is the area that they focused on, that Highway 7 coalition. So it was a group of from South Lake Minnetonka, Deep Haven, Carver County, Hopkins, St. Louis Park, and Minnetrista. And that was a group that was very, very specialized, and that actually spanned across three different regular enforcement grant groups. So really that partnership really came together focusing on that one small piece. Next. So they use the technology from AccuSensus, and I think a lot of you guys, they've gotten some amazing media coverage on this. If you're from the metro area, you can't not see the news and all of the stuff all over social media on their technology. But the camera was obviously purchased through MnDOT's funding. That was the side that they were, asking for that piece of it. And the enforcement time was funded by us or by DPS. So it was just camera assisted technology to detect distraction in unbelted occupants. So basically, the way that worked, officers received real-time alerts. So the camera kind of basically showed what was going on inside the vehicle, and the officer was just down the road being able to see that, and they would make the enforcement decision before making that traffic stop. So yes, I want to make that. No, I do not. But they were able to see it in real time and real-time alerts. Next. Just a couple of the pictures that were from this. I mean, it was very, very clear. Images of the front plate, so you can see who was involved. Images of the occupants, multiple angles were really, really helpful. Color picture of the vehicle, so you kind of can't argue that kind of stuff. And really focusing on that violation. You can see the seatbelt very clearly. You can see somebody's phone in their hand. So the distraction was obviously there. And that officer was able to make that stop based on the information they were receiving real time from this camera. Couple more pictures. Again, this just highlights that seatbelt is clearly worn, very easy to see. So very easy to see if it's not there. That phone in somebody's hand, so easily seen. Just couple of photos so you can see it's not in it. Most of these pictures, it's not in question. Was the phone in their hand or wasn't? You can clearly see it is. Just a couple of more pictures, just depicting what officers were seeing. Very interesting sometimes. What I really liked about this is they hosted a lot of multi-agency enforcement events. Again, they had a lot of different agencies involved. They were able to come together and focus on all kinds of, with that stretch going such a long way, they were able to do it throughout that entire area. So one officer verified the violation, they would call it out, the description to another officer. That's part of the regular multi-agency kind of philosophy on our regular enforcement grants. They really worked together and did that right here. This obviously can be done also as one officer type of thing. So, because they have all the information that they need to make a traffic stop, but they did find that collaborating and working with other groups or officers, their productivity was pretty high doing that as well. So it could be done either way. I just had to throw in one picture that I just thought was funny. People started to know those cameras were taking photos, and they got some very creative people. No phone in the hand, but they got some fun, what we call that, feedback. So again, the social media part on this was fantastic. The media coverage, it was hard not to know. I would be surprised if anybody that traveled that roadway on a very regular basis didn't know what it was. So there was regular social media posts, it was YouTube channel videos. It was covered by so many multiple news sources, and they did a great job of the social media piece of it too. Uh, Kind of some results. I thought this was really great. So doing some comparison. When you look at the distracted driving citations in 2024 versus the citations in April of 2025, you can see the difference. It's a very big deal. So how does that kind of, when you can see the difference of traffic stops and citations, there's no doubt that it makes a difference and it did work. Why do we do what we do? It's for the crashes and reducing that. So when you look at those citations, we know that citations change behavior. We know that not for everybody, but for the majority of people, citations do change behavior. So how does that kind of fast forward into crash data? So when you look at January through June, distracted driving crashes went down significantly. So when you look at in blue, it's the 2020 to 2024 average. That's the blue. So you can see how much higher it is than in 2025 with this AccuSensus technology that they were using and the enforcement piece of it. So it really brought the distracted driving crashes down during this time frame. Looking at all crashes, not just significant injury type of crashes. Again, bringing it down in 2025, that's the red of crashes coming down during that time frame that the AccuSensus was used versus the 2020 to 2024, how much higher it was. And when you're looking at a 5-year period in that red versus, I'm sorry, a 5-year period in that blue, that should be, 1 year. That's reflective of 1 year. That's a pretty significant difference. Go ahead. So the reason why this partnership works so well, they combined enforcement, the technology, the education, and what was really fun to see is how they involved some student-led peer groups. They really involved some schools. They got into them, and they actually won an award at our last TZD conference, which was so fun to see. So their education was solid, their enforcement was solid, they're using the technology. So overall, it was a lasting impact on driver behavior and public perception. So well done to this group.
All right. So I'll jump in too here with some of the projects that we did with the safe road zones. Kind of similar. We also funded some more dynamic speed feedback signs with this money. We did some of those rectangular rapid flashing beacons again. So I've already talked about those. One other thing that we did see was a couple agencies requested those portable radar trailers. So that was something we were able to fund with this money. We did ask, one agency asked, could we do kind of a bicycle helmet, a coloring books ad campaign for kids in our area? So we funded that. We had a couple online safety campaigns that wanted to be funded. So a lot of those were in joint with a lot of these things that Shannon talked about. Was law enforcement would be out doing additional enforcement like speed enforcement or distracted driving. But at the same time, too, the local law enforcement also be kind of doing like a Facebook social media campaign as well to let people know, like, hey, we're going to be doing this. Just so you know, speeding can kill people. Distraction is bad. Let people know. So it kind of coincided both the educational campaign along with the actual enforcement campaign. And then we were also able to fund a couple of road safety audits across the state so that agencies could come in, assess the roadway, figure out what they need to do from an engineering perspective to make that road better, and then ultimately down the road they can use other funding to build it. The contract process, this was where it got a little bit cumbersome, I'll say on the MnDOT side of things. I think Shannon's got a pretty slick process on her side since they've been doing this so long. But really, we had to get agencies to submit standard agreements, exhibits, define who the authorized rep was, do progress reports. We needed to do encumbrances. We needed a whole smattering of signatures that we weren't really expecting. So we kind of had this really elongated workflow. This is just kind of some information. This is kind of the hard part of the process. We also had to get our chief counsel office involved because this is a new program, and we had to put anti-fraud protections in place. And really, from the moment we awarded the contracts in April or May of 2024 there, it took us till January of 2025 to get all these contracts signed off and the money actually moving, which, if you remember, we only had till June 30th of 2025 to spend the money. So it really gave a really short time span for these cities and counties to actually spend the money. But they delivered. This is all the cities that we awarded money to. You can see, maybe your city's on there, how much they got. Once again, a lot of variety in the programs, a lot of variety in the types of things that they wanted to build or do. You can see there, based on that AccuCensus one, South Lake Minnetonka kind of won the lion's share there. They got $250,000. They ate up kind of the bulk of it. But really, once we got all done with this, we got a lot of good feedback. A lot of these small entities often feel like they're overlooked, that don't get opportunities to do things like this. So we got a lot of gratitude, which was nice. Once again, probably go back and thank guys like Paul, not guys like me. But we received a lot of positive community feedback. We got people online when we did these social campaigns saying, "Hey, thanks for doing this. This is great. We need more attention on this." They really appreciated the engagement. And one comment we saw was the new signage in our area will be fantastic for the next decade or more. The pedestrian crossing signs have been installed and are quite the eye catcher in our small town. It's amazing how a small upgrade to a crosswalk is the talk of the town. So, I mean, those are kind of the comments and some of the feedback that we got. Some things that we would do differently on this. Shannon mentioned this. We had two separate programs, one application. It was a little bit confusing. So that was one thing we'd probably try to figure out in the future. If we had to do this again with the legislature, we'd say like, hey, let's just do one $2 million grant and we'll figure out how best to get that distributed across various agencies. One thing that we did find that was pretty complicated was we did have to get our Office of Contract Management and Chief Counsel in from the start. We would have brought them in earlier if we had known it was going to be as complicated as it was. Another thing we found out too was towards the end, as we got close to signing these things, we found out we needed resolutions from cities. And that was like at the last minute. So now we got to go back to these cities. We've done all this work and be like, oh, by the way, we need a resolution, which isn't exactly an easy thing for a city council to pass the next day. Usually they got to do that at the next meeting. So just a lot of these little things we figured out as we went because we've never gone through a program like this. So that was kind of our last, what would we do differently is both these rural high-risk roads and safe road zones are great programs. We're really glad we got the money. We're really glad we did it. But this one-off funding can be very hard for agencies like MnDOT and other agencies and DPS and these statewide agencies. When these kind of just pop up, you don't know what they are. You got to define what they are. It'd be much better going forward if we just had this as a regular program, regular funding, something we could deliver every year. Because when we can deliver, especially in the infrastructure world, when we have a known amount of money we can deliver year after year, we can start delivering better projects year after year because we know the money's coming and we know what we want to build. So with that, I'm going to say thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Paul, I believe, right?
Yes, awesome.
All right.
Thank you both. Thank you both very much. Just a quick comment on like the future of these programs. We were not able to get funding appropriated at levels anywhere close to the 2023 levels in the 2025 budget cycle. The one little ray of hope was there is money that moves into the Advisory Council on Traffic Safety that is eligible for grants. And these kinds of programs are eligible expenditures in that process. So the pipeline exists, and our hope is over more time to get more money into that pipeline. And that applies to the Safe Road Coalitions as well. And so I'm going to turn it over to Annette. She's going to take us on a walk through the Safe Road Coalitions. And I know she'll note this, but I want to note this up front, that the state does have some funding for Safe Road Coalitions, but there are many Safe Road Coalitions out there that don't have funding and don't have support, similar to the rural high-risk roadways and the safe road zones. And so as we look forward, our hope is we can bolster all these programs at the same time. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Annette.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. I'm really excited today to talk with you all about the Minnesota Safe Roads Coalitions and kind of the work that we've been done. Also share some successes that we're seeing across the state. And so really wanted to kind of kick today off with just saying Safe Roads Coalitions, there are community-based partnerships that were formed underneath the Towards Zero Death Safe Roads program. So our coalitions are really pulling together our 5Es, so enforcement, engineering, EMS, education, and everyone who has that vision of reducing our traffic-related fatalities and serious injuries on our roads. So by bringing together partners, bringing them to the table, we can tackle shared challenges in no single E can achieve by itself. So we are engaging diverse voices, building the grassroots foundation, trust and fostering our community ownership. Collaborations are coalitions also strengthen our advocacy and sustain long-term effects and create more resilient and connected communities. So so what our coalitions can do. So Safe Roads coalitions, they do support our safe system approach and also our Minnesota Strategic Highway Safety Plan. Really what they do is they identify our local traffic safety issues, and they use our crash data and community input to put together what is that targeted strategy to address the risky driving behaviors such as speeding, impairment, distraction, and lack of seatbelt use within their specific county. So each coalition conducts public education campaigns, they do community outreach, and support the enforcement efforts as well. Our Safe Roads coalitions analyze our fatal and serious injury crashes, and they recommend strategies as part of an action planning process through our fatal and serious injury review communities. So next slide. So coalitions, why do they work? And so by bringing people and organizations, agencies together for a shared purpose, we have, of course, a broader reach. And so what does that mean? We're bringing diverse voices and perspectives to the table to address our traffic crashes. It builds community ownership. When people feel a sense of pride and ownership in their community, they are more likely to engage, support, and sustain change. Local buy-in transforms initiatives into shared movements that can create lasting impacts. And so those greater impacts coordinate actions, address the root causes of what we're seeing in our communities. Through capacity building, members learn and share skills that strengthen our work. Our coalitions also bring in that sustainability part. And so coalitions can continue where our state lead efforts, maybe expand them and help build our efforts moving forward. And then again, our coalitions have that strong advocacy, so that unified voice within our local level creates more influence and helps the momentum move forward. Coalitions also improve relationships that foster collaboration, of course, across all of our E's. And together, these benefits make coalitions a powerful tool for creating safe roads. When we unite, we amplify the possibility, and this is a power behind transforming our traffic safety culture. Next slide. So today we are going to talk a little bit about successes. And so some of the different successes we've seen with our Safe Roads Coalition and kind of that power of partnership. So as you can see, Joyride, we're also going to talk a little bit about responsible beverage server training, Buckle Up for a Buck, the Impact Teen Driver, CarFit, and a little bit about post-crash care. So Safe Roads Education, stay on that side, please. Safe Roads Education supports our law enforcement by building public understanding and cooperation around our traffic safety culture and traffic safety laws. When communities educate about issues like seatbelts, impaired, distraction, speeding, compliance improves. Education also helps our public see law enforcement as partners in safety rather than enforcers, and it strengthens trust and community engagement. So I want to talk a little bit about post-crash care and what that means for success. And so really what that means is that the right people are arriving quickly, they're communicating effectively, they're providing high quality medical care, they're clearing our roadways safely and learning from the incident to prevent future fatalities. So together, education enforcement creates stronger, more effective approaches to reducing crashes and saving lives. So this slide that you're seeing here now in front of you, it talks about the Joyride program. And so basically what the Joyride program is a sober ride home from an establishment. And so it is set up differently, run differently in each of the regions or counties that offer that program in Minnesota. And so it really supports our safe roads by providing reliable, alcohol-free transportation options for people who've been out drinking. And it helps prevent impaired driving, one of our leading causes of fatal and serious injury crashes. It ensures that individuals have a safe ride home. The program reduces the number of impaired drivers on our roadways. It protects other road users and promotes responsible decision-making within the communities. It also reinforces that message that there is always a safe alternative to to driving under the influence. So in the communities where we have implemented the Joyride program, we are showing a reduction in DWI incidents, and that is really a strong indication that the Sober Cab program is working. When fewer people are arrested or involved in crashes related to impaired driving, it suggests that more individuals are making safer choices, likely influenced by the availability and awareness of our Sober Cab options. While other factors like enforcement and education campaigns also contribute to that decline, consistent reductions in DWI rates alongside active use of this program show it's effective in helping keep our impaired drivers off roads and making the community safer. So great partnerships along with this program. So we have community sponsors that are out there helping us to promote that program. The Safe Roads Coalitions and all of our partners are helping to promote that program. So I want to talk specifically about one county in the South Central region. So LeSueur County, they are having a positive impact on their DWI and their crash trends around impairment. And so since this program started, they have offered over 2,220 rides home safely from their community events. It has shown that individuals that are out and maybe didn't make the plan ahead of time are choosing a safer alternative to get home safely. So you can go to the next slide. Responsible beverage server training. And so really what this does is it supports our safe roads by ensuring that alcohol servers and sellers understand that how to prevent overservice and stop impaired individuals from driving. By teaching the staff to recognize the signs of intoxication, how to check their IDs, and promote safe ride options, responsible beverage server training reduces the number of impaired drivers on our roads, and it helps prevent alcohol-related crashes. Responsible beverage server training also fits into the safe system approach by promoting safer road users and emphasizing that shared responsibility between businesses, communities, and individuals. It also falls into our strategic highway safety plan as well, as it aligns the impaired driving emphasis areas, and it supports our statewide goals of reducing serious and fatalities through education, prevention, and safer community practices. Next slide. So on this slide here, you see a buckle up for a buck. And so what this really does is it really helps to save lives by promoting seatbelt use through positive reinforcement and awareness. And here's how. So it encourages that safe behavior. So by rewarding drivers who are already buckled up, enforces the habit and motivates others to do the same. It helps to raise awareness. The event draws attention to the importance of seatbelt use. It reminds drivers and passengers that it's a simple action that can prevent serious injuries and fatalities in a crash. It also helps to create that positive community engagement. And so instead of just focusing only on enforcement, the event really builds goodwill and trust between enforcement, safety organizations, and the community. Really what that immediate impact is, people are more likely to buckle up when they see others, their peers, being rewarded, especially when they learn that seatbelts can reduce the risk of fatalities and serious injuries. So we have a lot of great partnerships in our communities who are offering this program between our local police departments, our sheriff's offices, EMS partners, our Safe Roads Coalitions, and then of course our sponsors of these events. They're really empowering our communities to make safer choices and protect one another. This work also supports our safe system approach by focusing on that shared responsibility and strengthening the layers of protection to prevent serious harm. These are also key priorities reflected in our SHSP. During these events, we also encourage the participants to share that message with their friends, their families, their coworkers about the importance of wearing their seatbelts, which helps us to increase our reach. So these partnerships are powerful and impact good decisions. Next slide. As some of you know, in the fall of 2023, we brought the Impact Teen Driver program to Minnesota. And what this program and what the TZD is trying to accomplish is changing that culture of safe driving. So therefore, creating safer drivers now, but for our future generations of drivers as well. So the Impact Teen Driver focuses not only on the driver, but also being a good passenger. So the curriculum really focuses on the bullet points that you see on this slide. So impaired driving, speed, and reckless, with a big focus on the importance of wearing your seatbelts and distractions. When we talk about distractions, we're not just talking about their phones. We're talking about anything that's taking their mind off from driving, which can include our passengers in our car, eating, music, drinking our coffee, putting on our makeup, or just plain being drowsy or medications. So when we talk about the seatbelts, and really why we're talking about being a good passenger is we know that 50% of our younger driver fatalities are passengers. And so it makes total sense that we are educating our passengers on, of course, making those good choices as well. So power of partnerships, the education of our teens in safe driving, on changing those attitudes, we can't do that alone. And so Impact Teen Driver Program and all of their staff that help bring this program to Minnesota, of course, our great partnerships with Minnesota State Patrol, our local sheriff's offices and police departments, MnDOT, the Department of Public Safety, the Department of Health, all of our local schools that are allowing us to come in and spend time with their 10th graders and share this important message. And then, of course, all of our TZD regional coordinators who are supporting this program across their regions. But in order to expand this program, we really need to build on that momentum. Our local coalitions are jumping on board and helping us implement this program. And so that's exciting to see the changes that are occurring through this program. Next slide, please. All right, so CarFit, what that really does is it helps us reduce our fatal and serious injury crashes among our older drivers by improving how they fit into their vehicles for maximum safety and visibility. This program is ensuring proper seat, mirror, and seatbelt positioning, which can enhance comfort, reaction time, and field of view. It also raises awareness of physical and cognitive changes that can affect driving. And participants have resources such as occupational therapists at the events. By promoting safer people and safer vehicles, CarFit supports that safe system approach, and it helps our older drivers stay safe and independent on our roadways. We have great partnerships with AARP to help us with training and events. We have great partnerships with occupational therapists across the state, and of course, all of our local partners to help implement that program. Next slide. The state of Minnesota was seeing an increase in our older driver fatalities and serious injuries, so the statewide action team was formed. And so we have brought some non-traditional partners to the table to help us address our older driver fatalities and serious injury crashes. And so one of the big things that we've been working on is we updated and added additional information to an older driver resource guidebook. We have an educational toolkit that was developed and that is going to be used across the state to help provide that education to some of our older drivers. And then, of course, we are currently working on that medical provider and occupational therapy survey to help us build a resource or a toolkit for our healthcare systems that want to help us with our older driver education and outreach. You can go to the next slide, please. So with that said, as with any program, we are seeing some challenges and gaps in areas that we are working to address. And so insufficient funding. So of course, as Paul noted earlier, we do have funding that we receive from the Advisory Council. We have received funding through NHTSA, but they're not enough or adequate, I should say, to help us sustain or to grow our efforts statewide. So there's a funding limitation. Our coalition's budgets, some of them have needed to be reduced. We have fewer coalitions who are able to be funded, and so we're unable to grow additional efforts. We have limited coalition capacity, and so because resources contain only a small number of coalitions are active, leaving many counties without that structure of community leadership. So we really need to look at how do we increase and how do we get more coalitions up and running throughout the state of Minnesota to help us support the efforts and build on the program. And then restricted funding flexibility. So sometimes funding comes with that narrow spending requirements. It reduces our ability for coalitions to adapt when there's certain things that come up or strategies, or to kind of think out of the box. Funding for sober rides. And so a lot of the Safe Roads coalitions that are doing the Joyride program, they rely on community sponsors to help with that. And so it sometimes limits how many events that they can offer. Funding for older driver transportation, that was one of the things that our older driver statewide action team recognizes, is that is going to be an area of concern as people start to retire from driving. And then funding for our teen TZD. What we really want to do is build more teen TZD peer-to-peer education across the state. And so additional funding would help support that. Next slide, please. So if these gaps persist, the following impacts are something that we can anticipate. So without sustainable funding, no entity is positioned to lead at the community level, resulting in that loss of momentum. And when momentum stalls, partnerships weaken, local enforcement declines, and progress made towards our safer communities can quickly fade, forcing us and coalitions to rebuild relationships, rebuild that trust, and start the process all over again. With that, the TZD regional coordinators have a large area to cover, and assisting with funding can help support those local coalitions to help them create that lasting change. So reduced outreach and community engagement through community education and partnership activities can remain limited. And so delayed progress towards our goals. Critical tasks needed to advance the program goals remain underdeveloped because of limited flexibility and funding. And then, of course, inability to evaluate effectiveness. So without the resources for evaluation, outcomes sometimes are hard to measure, and so limiting our opportunities for data-driven improvement. So every dollar invested in our Safe Roads coalitions helps save lives. They prevent injuries. They build safer, more connected communities. And by addressing the funding gaps, it's essential for us to expand these coalitions, our reach, strengthen our community leadership, and ensure accountability and evaluation. Additional investments will help us accelerate our progress towards our goals and our community impact by helping us reach that ultimate goal of zero fatalities and serious injuries. Next slide. But because of the partnerships across the state, our past investments, and the work that we've done, we have saved, as you can see from the slide, more than 5,000 lives in the past 23 years. So as you all know, that ultimate goal is, of course, reaching zero. And we can do this by changing our traffic safety culture and increasing our risks. So I want to thank you for all you do to make a difference on our roadways, and together we can reach zero traffic deaths. Thank you.
Thank you, Annette. So what does this all mean? Well, as Annette talked about and Shannon and Derek talked about, from every level, whether it be a group of concerned citizens about a given stretch of road, all the way through the township, city, county, state structure, there are some tools, there are some programs that exist to help knit together that interest in traffic safety with resources. Money comes and goes a little bit in that cycle, but with resources, with knowledge, with expertise, with experience, to try to provide an answer or part of a solution, or at least some level of response and prevention to an event that or a situation that people are interested in taking care of. So I think that would be one takeaway I'd encourage you to leave with. Stephanie or Jackson, are there any questions for our speakers?
Paul, there's nothing right now that I see in chat or Q&A, but if anybody has a question, please go ahead and drop it in there and we can make sure it gets answered.
Absolutely. Thank you. I guess we've got a few housekeeping slides here at the end that we want to make sure. A piece of the goal with all of our programs is to have an evaluation available. So if you would pull out your phones and snap this QR code, give us some feedback on this survey, on this session or other sessions that you would like to see, that would be absolutely awesome. We have some upcoming events. We've got the Tribal Traffic Safety Summit on the 23rd up at the Black Bear Casino. We've got the Traffic Safety Day at the Mall of America on April 11th. We have a range of regional workshops. You can go to the Minnesota TZD site to find those workshop dates and locations. On the 29th of August through the 2nd of September, the GHSA annual meeting is being held in Minneapolis. So that is a massive gathering of traffic safety interests and advocates and brain wizards. And lastly, we will have a whole set of spring 26 hot dish sessions that will be coming to you soon. We haven't set those all yet. So thank you so much for attending. Like us on Facebook, subscribe to TZD and Axe for updates. We appreciate your time and attention at Traffic Safety today. If there's things we can help you with or resources we can aim you at, please feel free to contact any of us who have been on this webinar. And other than that, I hope you have a great week and stay safe out there.